The Flames have just one game left this season, and they are just never going to go out quietly.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, and thank you so much for joining me today. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Today, we are going to talk about the resilience of this specific Calgary Flames team and how it's kind of inspiring and why I think it's going to bleed into next season and hopefully the seasons moving forward, as well as there being a new goaltender in town and what this might mean for our Flames. But before we dive into any of that, please make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your team every day. Well, last night against the Coyotes was quite the game. I'm not really sure what else there is to say other than good job. Maybe try to play defense. Glad you could score some goals, but you kind of need to play both ends of the ice. I thought that, offensively, it was a really good game. You know, you had the young guys scoring. You had Zari and Coronado getting on the board in Kuzmenko, and then Kadri as well. I thought that it was just a good game. We talk about the younger guys just needing to get reps and seeing more ice time in order to elevate their play and to kind of evaluate where they're at versus where they started the season. And I know that there's been a lot of criticism for Coronado, and I don't think that it's entirely fair. Sure, he hasn't had the best season in the NHL, but he is showing you really strong signs in the AHL. And ultimately it matters how you play at the NHL level, but he has not had time to get acclimated. He was up and down through a lot of the season. He wasn't seeing consistent ice time. He's also getting used to being an NHL player. He's getting used to the travel, to, that work ethic. It's very different from college, and you don't have, your season is double as long. And I don't find it fair to write off this season for him. I think it's kind of unfair because he hasn't seen much NHL time, and that's not to his own detriment. I think he was going to be a lot more useful and see more time in the AHL to begin with. They tried it at the start of the season and it wasn't working out, and that's fine because you don't need to prematurely make the jump. If Coronado goes back down and, has a good run through the playoffs, that's great. But ultimately, the goal is to have a strong transition to the NHL. It doesn't even necessarily have to be super strong off the bat, as we've seen clearly, but you want to see more than what you're currently seeing. And I think a season of time, a true full season in the pros will help him with that next year. I also think that it's funny that people were kind of talking about Connor Zary and how he hasn't been scoring as much, and he's just kind of a product of Nazem Kadri, and it's no, not entirely. But it's been so fun to watch Kuzmenko score as well. I think it's really nice when you see a player that's struggled with their confidence through the season or fall into a slump for whatever reason. Finally, like bust open those floodgates, and it's great to see. It's even better because he's on the Flames, but it's so easy to root for a guy like Kuzmenko. Super easy. This team is full of underdogs, but the main thing here is that you are never going to get this team to just like pack it up and quit. They have made that abundantly clear. They didn't do it last season. They were really up in like the playoff race, if you want to call it that, even really up until game 82. And I thought that's how it was going to be this season. But they ended up, falling further back each night. I think they came after the All-Star or the trade deadline, rather. They were like 4 or 5 points out. They closed that gap a little bit, and then it ended up being 14, and there was no way for them to catch anyone. So good stuff. I also did not realize this. Arizona did not live tweet the game last night, which is very odd. And if you're not really on social media or aren't familiar with how typically professional sports teams work, you are always live tweeting a game. There is always someone live tweeting the game on the team account. Now, did they just not do it because they said, well, I'm probably not going to have a job when this team relocates anyways? Were there extenuating circumstances? Do they just want to leave Alex Morello's statement as like the first thing on the feed, even though they can just pin the tweet? Regardless, it's a whole mess, and we're going to have more answers to the Arizona saga coming later this week. But the Flames versus the Arizona Coyotes, that was their last matchup last night. So presumably their last matchup. So it'll be interesting to kind of see where things go from there. I don't think Dustin Wolf was great, but I also think that the Flames defense is not what it used to be. And I think that it would have been a lot better to transition Dustin Wolf to the NHL with a defense that had Chris Tanev on it. Just a thought. But coming up next, we are going to talk more about goaltending and what the latest signing means for everyone involved in the goaltending situation. But first, we are going to take a quick break, and we will be back right after this. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thanks everyone for hanging out with me today on Locked On Flames. I hope you are enjoying your week, and make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, because we will be here for you through the off season as well. The Flames announced earlier today that they signed Finnish goaltender that was tearing it up in the Swedish league, Walterri Ignatjew, to a 1-year, 2-way deal. He played all but 7 games, so he played 52 games this season in the Swedish league, and But that's impressive. He's put up really great numbers save percentage wise. I didn't see any of like the deeper stats for the goal saved above expected and all that stuff. But he finished the season with a .918 save percentage. So I will say that that's pretty good. This is not a bad thing by any means. We know that the Flames are more than likely letting Dan Vladar walk. They are more than likely going to be trading Jacob Markstrom this summer. And that just leaves them with Dustin Wolf, really. And I don't think Oscar Dansk is going to be an NHL goaltender at this time. But I did I did read the Flames introduction piece on Ignatjew, and I just thought it was really interesting because he was never drafted, and a few teams had interest in him over the winter, but the Flames really connected with him and really established a good personal relationship. And that he's 24 years old and he signed with the Flames. He was caught the eye of the Flames goaltending coach, and then he he passed the eye test when Sigalet traveled to Sweden in December to watch him play. And let's see. He's never had the opportunity to come over. That's been his dream, obviously, is to try to make it to the NHL. I think he just sees opportunity here. He wants to be a Flame, and we're excited about that. We're just looking forward to getting him over here and getting him acclimated. It's going to be a bit of a different game, obviously, on the smaller ice, but it could be a bit of an adjustment period, but we see a lot of upside. That's the other thing too. I think like there is obviously like rink size differences and everything like that with European leagues, and they're the same way it takes players time to like adjusting to a new team, even though it's in the same league. I think getting acclimated to a whole different like style of play, or rink size and systems and a whole new language is that's going to take some time to get settled in. And I guess he has a calming presence and cool under pressure mentality, and they saw that. And he was named Swedish goaltender of the year and a finalist for league MVP. That's really exciting. I think it doesn't mean anything bad. I don't think you need to worry about Dustin Wolf. I think it's obvious that he is still getting acclimated to the NHL, and just because he what's the word I'm looking for? Excelled through development, and he kind of like launched, like his trajectory was like straight up. Like it was only up from there. Like he did such a good job. At some point he was going to kind of have to come back down to earth, and that's what's happening in the NHL, and that's not a knock to him. Going from juniors to the AHL and then to the NHL with not a lot of time in the AHL is a challenge. And we know that we just talked about it. Everyone needs time to get acclimated to the NHL, to their team, to the team they're playing, or to the team that's playing in front of them. What works, what doesn't work, and building that focus and that confidence. I don't think you have anything to worry about with Dustin Wolf. I know that there's been a lot of conversation of, well, he's small. Okay. He is also like, look at his resume, and I don't think you need to be worried. I think you just have to be patient with him because otherwise you're going to drive yourself crazy and like write off a goaltender who has not fully developed into an NHL player yet. But I also think that this means a trade is more than likely to happen with Markstrom. I think that that relationship really was soiled over the break or prior to the trade deadline. I think that it was just very difficult to, like, Markstrom didn't want his name out there like that in the first place, and then it happened in a not so great way. And he let everyone know how he felt about it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's great when a player speaks their mind, and especially when they were doing the organization a favor. Like, Markstrom didn't have to waive his no movement clause. There's no trade clause. He didn't have to do that, but he did. And ownership got greedy. So good for him, because there are so many different factors that go into a trade and uprooting your entire life across North America. And I would assume that something does get done this summer. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on and just enjoy what you got from Markstrom. But also going back to Dustin Wolf, I do want to say that we talk a lot about this on this show, the transition from developmental stages to full-time pro. Dustin Wolf was expected to take that giant step this season, and he didn't. Not by any fault of his own, but because there was a different path envisioned. There was no real interest in Dan Vladar. They didn't move Markstrom. And there was nothing else you could really do. Like, you couldn't, if you waived Vladar, you were going to end up losing him on waivers to nothing. And, could they have maybe put him on LTIR and had Wolf come up earlier? I don't know. And when he hasn't been filling in for Vladar, he's filled in for Markstrom a few times. You have to get used to the pace of play, the style of play, and the high caliber talented players that you are facing against night after night after night. Like, this isn't like a walk in the park. So for Dustin Wolf's sake, I hope everyone is just kind of patient. That's really the word I'm looking for. People just need to be patient with him and assume things will progress. And the same way we talk about with players like Kuzmenko, the more ice time you see, the better you're going to get. The more inflated, I guess, you're going to see an increase in production. So, give it time. But coming up next, we are going to talk about the end of the season and how it ends this Thursday. Coming up next here on Locked On Flames. But first, the season's just about over. Like, we are very much at the rounding third. We are just about to touch home plate. And even though the Flames will not be continuing on in the postseason, I want to remind you that you can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like David Pastrnak, Brad Marchand, or Sidney Crosby will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. To win a 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Flames fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That is code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with me today on Locked On Flames. You can follow me on Twitter at Jess Belmosto. We talked a lot this season, really even last offseason, about how relentless of a group this is. And, they were very much like cockroaches last year where, nothing was going to kill them until they did it to themselves. And the ending came a lot sooner for the Flames than I expected. I really thought that it would come down to game 82 and it would more than likely be not happening. It feels like we blinked and all the hope and potential for the season was snatched from us. But we had this confidence, I guess, brought into the room as well, because you have a new coach and a general manager and a front office that seem to all be on the same page in terms of moving this team forward. It is not a matter of doing right by your veterans or, signing a guy because he's 6'6" on skates and 215. You had to earn your time on the ice this season. And I think that that's very different from the years past where I have covered this team. I think about how night after night they went out and they went to work. It wasn't always a good shift. It wasn't always a good game, but they showed up. And I think back to when Huberdeau was benched for the third period early on in the season and what that does to a player, especially a player of Huberdeau's caliber. And no one is above criticism. No one is immune from it. This team has really worked their way through this season. They have clawed their way through the season. Yeah, you want them to finish worse because it's better draft positioning, but they didn't give up. They didn't just pack it up after the trade deadline. That just didn't happen. And the work ethic of this team is very impressive. And I think that when you have this desire to be better and to become a better group, you're pushing yourself and you're I just think of how Blake Coleman and Mackenzie Weegar have shown up for every game. Blake Coleman has had a career year and he has played incredibly well this season. He has had a career year. There are a number of players on this team that have had career years. And we talk about how you're obviously going to see an increase in production with an increase of ice time. But to me, this just felt like it was confidence for this team. They knew that they could go out there and do these things. I look at Connor Zary and Martin Pospisil, who came into this season more than likely going to be a season for the AHL, and both get called up on Halloween. And here we are at the end of the season, and there wasn't much of anything that got in their way, minus a suspension for Pospisil, and Zary missed a little bit of time due to an injury as well. And Kevin Rooney came back late this season and immediately jumped on the penalty kill and became effective. These guys know their place. They are fully aware of what they need to do to get the job done. And I think that that's great. And the mentality of, we don't just pack up and quit. Like, it speaks to their resilience, to their motivation. And spite does a lot to a person. It's a great motivator. And that's something else we've talked a lot about this season. I really do miss the games where the Flames had a true difference maker, where they had a Matthew Tkachuk or a Johnny Gaudreau. And, if the Flames were down by a goal or two in the third period, one of them could score a goal and the game would kind of open up. They don't have that anymore. And they have to find new ways to win until they're able to find a difference maker. I just am so and I understand it's not like a winning season by any means, but the fact that this time last year, 7 players supposedly put in trade requests. Brad Treliving had packed it up and was ready to go. They didn't know what was going to happen. They had a coach that hated them, or it was mutual. And this year, there was a sense of stability. They played through that, but they're knee deep in the trenches of this transitional phase. But they are hard workers, and I think it just speaks volumes that Mackenzie Weegar would go out there night after night and answer questions that seemingly a captain should have to answer. Or, Blake Coleman would address the media and answer the tough questions. I understand that there were a lot of different factors that played into this season, but we also need to remember that they were coming back from a not so good environment. And Ryan Huska has fostered a pretty open door policy environment. Same with Craig Conroy, and they care. It's not just okay, go out on the ice and do your job, or I'm benching you because you're trash. You look back at Jonathan Huberdeau's performance where he got benched for an entire third period and how that affected him and how that can shift a player's momentum. You look at Connor Zary, who was healthy scratched and then came back the next night and played center and has had fantastic games since. There's no quit in this team. And yeah, you want there to be a little quit because you want better draft positioning, but you're never going to get this team to just quit, to roll over and die. That's not this team. And I hope that going into next season, they carry this mentality of, we have gotten through these last 2 seasons that were not good. We can fight through anything and keep going. That's how I'm looking at this. They can keep fighting. They have not shown any signs of giving up. And I think that that's important to remember as they continue their battle through this transitional phase. Call it a rebuild, call it a retool, whatever you want. At the end of the day, it's a transitional phase and they are knee deep. But that will do it for me today on Locked On Flames. Thank you all so much for tuning in and hanging out with me today. As always, you can find the show wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube, and you can find me on Twitter at Jess Belmosto. And I will see you all tomorrow.